good, y'all? Welcome back. Welcome back to the other side here on a fresh perspective with Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. Glad that you're joining me again. I appreciate it. Welcome on in. Also, like this podcast, share this podcast, and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave me a 5-star rating on whatever podcast app you're using, and maybe just a couple sentences of a review to tell people why you love this podcast so much. Now, we're still talking about the FBI raid on former President Donald Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago, and I've already talked about why there are reasons to be skeptical about this raid and about the FBI's motives in carrying it out. And I also talked about how this could have certain political ramifications. I talked about a poll that showed that over 70% of Republicans are more likely to vote in the upcoming midterm elections now because of that raid than they were before. And that far outpaces Democrats, who were only at about 52%. But there's another conversation that's happening. And to be fair, this conversation is happening on both sides. One of my colleagues at Red State, Bonchi, he wrote an article talking about this, and it was really a cautionary article to not fall into the trap. And what trap is he talking about? He's talking about the January 6th type of trap. There are concerns that this raid will cause more violence coming from the right. Now, there hasn't been a lot of violence coming from the right, at least not political violence. You had January 6th, and that's about it. But some are concerned that this will push some people over the edge. I mean, there's always nut jobs out there, so it's possible. It is possible. You never know what can happen. And Bonchi's article was designed to warn against that, right? Because none of us want violence. I mean, you always hear people talk about, oh, there's going to be a civil war. I mean, that conversation's been ongoing for the past 5 years ad nauseum. You're like, Tim Pool, he's an okay dude, but I mean, that guy, I mean, he better stop wishing for civil war. I know he's not wishing for it, but it's like every episode, civil war, and I bet he's screaming that right now. But and in this case, I can kind of understand why a little bit, because something like this can cause violence. I kind of don't think it will, or if it does, it'll just be like a one-off. I don't expect, another riot or another situation like that. But you never know. I could be wrong. But what's interesting about this conversation coming from the left, when I'm looking at how the activist media is handling this, it's almost like some of these people hope that there will be violence from the right. I mean, they're not coming out and saying that, but the way they're talking about it, I mean, I'm seeing op-ed after op-ed and report after report talking about, oh, there are people on the right who are using violent rhetoric. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and I want to talk about the strategy that they're using and what I think that they're trying to do. Really, I mean, of course, before I even go into all that, obviously we know what their ultimate objective is, especially if we're talking specifically about the activist media. And it seems like they're trying to leverage this raid to put their allies in Congress in a more favorable position. I've already talked about how dire things look for Democrats, especially if this investigation does not turn out the way that they hope. But if you look at some of these op-eds out there, and I'm only going to talk about a few, but there's a lot. It seems like they're anticipating violence, and they're preemptively trying to cast blame on some high-profile conservative pundits, just in case there is violence. So The Atlantic, they published a piece, and the author said, quote, "The MAGA world denizens have called for violence and civil war." And as proof of this, the author goes to Truth Social and finds some randos on there talking about violence. Here's a quote. Here's a language alert. You don't need that. One of them, some guy on Truth Social posted, "Fuck a civil war, give them a revolution. We outnumber all of them 10-1. Then the author brings up another random user on Truth Social who said, quote, "It certainly feels like they're treating it as a hot civil war. When this is all said and done, the people responsible for these tyrannical actions need to be hanged." Now, the article goes on because the author knows that he can't really make much of a case just by some random folks on Truth Social. So he goes to conservative pundits. Um, so he says, quote, the Gateway Pundit, which is a pro-Trump outlet, they wrote, this means war. And this was, quote, quickly amplified by a Telegram account connected to Stephen K. Bannon, Mr. Trump's one-time political advisor. Let's see, what they had another one here. Another Trump advisor, Michael Caputo. He said, with this militant raid on President Trump's home, we have become Russia. The FBI is the KGB. Dan Bongino from Fox News. He referred to the raid as some, quote, third world bullshit. I mean, he's not wrong. But here's the thing. Was there anything violent in there? No. Hyperbolic? Strong language? Yeah, sure. This is politics. People on both sides do this. Like, you can't... I'll get to that in a second. Next, we have the Washington Post's Dana Milbank, who... okay. I don't normally say stuff like this, but Dana Milbank is one of the dumbest left-wing columnists that I've ever seen. This guy wrote an article, I think in 2017, talking about how Trump being elected has affected his physical health. Like, that's how dense this guy is. And he actually expected us to believe that. But he also wrote an op-ed that parroted, the same talking points. He wrote, quote, I would like nothing more than to be wrong about this. Yeah, right. But the reckless response by the GOP Fox News axis to the FBI's search of Mar-a-Lago makes it feel as though we're falling into the abyss. Well, he's right, but not for the reasons that he thinks. So he continued. He said, quote, in such a dangerous and unstable time, we need political and opinion leaders to appeal for calm. Instead, Fox News and other conservative outlets exploded with talk of war and assassination, an attack on the country and Trump supporters, and calls for revenge against a corrupt American KGB. He wrote, elected Republicans erupted in cries about the weaponized politicization done by a Democratic Gestapo and a tyrannical FBI, and about the need to make sure these tyrants pay the price. They called for retribution, quote, destroy the FBI. No one is safe. You're next. They're coming for you. Now, if you notice, there were no actual calls to violence or even suggestions that we should get engaged in violence, and we know exactly why. Because no high-profile conservative influencer is pushing for violence or civil war, at least none that I've seen. But still, the activist media is trying to blame these people in advance. They did it to Steven Crowder, too, and I'm not really a fan of Steven Crowder, but he doesn't deserve this. Steven Crowder, I can't remember exactly what he tweeted, but he says, get ready for war, sleep well. Now, anybody with an IQ higher than my shoe size knows that when people use words like war or KGB or whatever, they're not talking about an actual shooting war. I can't believe I even have to say this, but it is 2022, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Every single person that wrote an op-ed to this effect knows damn well that these are not calls for violence. Are they strong language? Yes. But honestly, coming from people who call us Nazis and fascists and bigots and racists and people who want to commit hate crimes or being in league with those who do, I'm sorry, I don't take that very seriously. I didn't see Dana Milbank calling that out on his side. I didn't see any of these people telling people on the left to tamp down the rhetoric because they like that stuff. They just like it when their people do it. They don't like it when it's on the other side. Nobody's actually calling for a civil war. Now, you always have speculation, and like I said, we've had speculation over the past few years, so this is nothing new. But here's the thing. Could an act of violence happen coming from somebody who identifies with the right? Like I said, of course it's possible. Anything can happen. But it doesn't mean that any of these people are responsible. It's just like when that guy tried to assassinate Republican lawmakers at that baseball game in 2017 or 2018, and he was a Bernie bro and was influenced by Bernie's rhetoric. I didn't blame Bernie Sanders for that. I don't. I think that politicians can contribute to the atmosphere, but I don't blame them directly. This guy acted on his own. These were his actions, and he should be blamed for his actions. But again, they're trying to preemptively blame conservatives or conservative commentators for potential violence. Now, here's the thing. Even if something like that happened, what would be the reaction on the right? Well, okay, I'll be honest, to be fair. You would have a lot of people pretending like it was really the feds. You would have a lot of people pretending that it was really some leftist operative in disguise pretending to be a MAGA person. I get that. We love our conspiracies here over on the right, so I'm not going to pretend like that's not a thing. But the vast majority of conservatives would condemn those actions, just like we did with January 6th. There was an outpouring of outrage coming from the right. Yes, you had some people defending it, but those people were fringe. They were few and far in between. The vast majority of Republican lawmakers, politicians, leaders outright condemned the violence. Unlike the left after the murder of George Floyd, and I'll be fair, there were some Democrats who condemned the rioting that happened for a year after that footage went viral. But you also had people deflecting from it. You had people trying to cover it up. You had people outright defending it or justifying it. You had them, Vice President Kamala Harris, among others, donated to get these people out of jail when they were having their rioting spree. I mean, 25 people died in that. So they don't really have a moral leg to stand on here, but I get the strategy. I get what they're trying to do. And again, these are desperate measures because Democrats are desperate right now, and the activist media is desperate right along with them. I mean, over the past 5 years, they've pretty much pulled off the mask. They're not journalists anymore. That's why I will not refer to them as such. These are activist media. These are media activists who get in front of cameras and they spew propaganda. But again, like I said before, they better hope that the FBI comes up with something that rises above the level of National Archive documents or documents that should have been turned in, because if they don't, that's it. That is all. And while I do have my concerns, part of me thinks that that's probably how this whole thing is going to turn out. And this was a desperate gamble, but I could be wrong, but I don't think that this is going to go in Democrats' favor the way that they hope. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I'm going to sign off. Thanks again for checking this out, and I will see you next time.